Alright, so that's me. I'm trying to find my first engineering project. After some searching, I found these macro keypads. It seemed like a good first project, because not only would it challenge me in 3D printing, but it would also challenge me in electronics.
Stop.
Both things that I've been trying to learn. So I started planning. I didn't want to do anything crazy with a knob or lights, so I decided to start off with a simple 9-key keypad. And for the build, I'm allowing myself to use any resources online regarding the wiring and electronics, but I'm not allowing myself to steal any 3D printing files, because I want to improve my own CAD skills. So I didn't actually just spawn all this stuff in. I followed this random guy's tutorial and I bought all the stuff I needed off Amazon. So after all that, all I had to do was 3D print the case for it. To get started, I printed a little square to make sure I had the right measurements. So I made sure the little square fit, and after that I was ready to make the whole top part. My printer actually failed to print the top part about 2 or 3 times, so you can see in this next video that I'm pretty giddy when it finally printed.
This piece of poo-poo, finally. This is like my 3rd try after a bunch of garbage. Finally. Wow.
The print ended up looking okay, but I didn't like the bright blue color. So I decided to spray paint the part when it was really cold, and I ended up doing a pretty mid job at spray painting it, but at least it was better than the blue. At this point, I pretty much had everything besides the bottom of the 3D printed case, so I started building. The solder I had was way too thick, but I thought it would be a good idea to use it anyway, despite this being one of my first times soldering something. I was still following the random guy's tutorial, so I was making a 3x3 matrix. As you can see here, the soldering already was not very good. So after following the whole tutorial, I had this crazy mess right here with very bad solders, and to my surprise, it didn't work. I actually got some inputs to register, but it was very inconsistent and it clearly did not work how it was supposed to. So that was it. I tried to make a macro keypad with absolutely zero experience, and I failed. So I was a little disappointed that my first try didn't work, but instead of giving up, I decided to learn from it. I still had some extra switches laying around from one of my keyboards, so I started planning my next try. This time though, instead of following a tutorial, but not knowing how anything works in the tutorial, I was going to actually research and learn how the keys work to make a whole new keypad design. So I wanted to use only 4 keys so that I could dedicate a pin on the microcontroller to each key. And also I wanted to use the rotary encoder because it was not as complicated as I thought it was. So just like the first attempt, I wasted no time and I started acquiring materials for the build.
Crazy first attempt. Honestly, this doesn't even look bad. Nice little hole for the knob, 4 keys. Let's go. I had to use this crazy raft. Come on. Ugh. This is what happens when you have the Ender 3.
Especially now that I wasn't using a tutorial, I didn't know how much space I was going to take up, so I decided to build it and I would design the rest of the case from there once I had the build done. This time, before any soldering, I made sure that everything worked properly. I also made this absolute behemoth of a device to hold down anything I needed it to while I soldered. I not only bought better solder, but I also bought a better soldering iron. And along with that, I watched a bunch of videos and tutorials on how to solder, so I was pretty much locked in on the soldering part. After soldering the 4 keys, it was time to test them out.
Number 1, bang. Number 2, bang. This one, new tab. I'm gonna change them, and this is just what I got. But boom, bang. Yes,
With the 4 keys working, all I had to do now was wire up the knob.
Alright. Hey.
With all the components working, the next step was to 3D print the bottom for the case. The only problem was that the Arduino I bought had a crooked micro USB port, so I'd have to get creative with designing the housing for the port.
So it's about to be done. It's been 2 hours. I made sure the speed was set low. Wanted to make sure it was a high quality print. This little tree thing, I have no idea how I'm supposed to do this. Oh my gosh. Oh, I'm still kind of salty that the Arduino had a crooked port, because this is going to be really goofy. I just have this big square, and I'm going to try to do some crazy stuff to stabilize it. But it would be a lot easier if the port was just a normal port, and I could easily just design something that fits flush with it.
I was gonna use a part like this to stabilize the Arduino, but I just straight up forgot to add it before I printed the bottom of the case. So instead I hot glued it in and did my best to make sure any force wouldn't dislodge it. I secured the Arduino, and I also added screws to hold down the case, and now all I needed to do was print the plate that I was making for the port. After printing that plate with a lot of clearance, I decided to just super glue it on. I was pretty surprised with how it turned out, because even with the crooked port, it still fit. I put on some spare keycaps that came extra with one of my old keyboards. I honestly regret doing this, but I hot glued some material in the bottom to try to make some non-slip rubber pad, but it ended up looking really bad because of how much hot glue I used. And now the final step was making a knob and printing it.
The J is definitely questionable. Let's go. All I have to do is secure this because I purposely made it really loose, but pretty nice.
With the help of some hot glue, my 2-week journey of making a macro keypad, hours of 3D printing and modeling, and messing around with electronics, finally came to an end. Is this the most efficient and optimal design with zero room for improvement? Of course not. Looking at this now, there's obviously a lot of things I wish I could improve, but the act of starting and just making something, even if it wasn't the best, was a really good experience. Even if this keypad isn't anything extraordinary, I still learned a lot along the way, and honestly, the journey was fun. There was times I would fail at something, like the whole first design, but you gotta remember, it's about the journey, not the destination.